Hi there, Pastor Brian here. Have you ever thought about the question, what's it look like when the church is at its best? Like, is the church at its best when the worship team leads all your favorite songs? Or is the church at its best when the sermon outline is perfectly alliterated and the sermon ends on time? Or is the church at its best when your kids come out of Bayside Kids with giant smiles on their faces saying, guess what we learned about today? Is that the church at its best? The answer is kind of, and there's more. When I was 16, my youth pastor gathered a few of us in this little Bible study, and he took us to Acts chapter 2 and Acts chapter 4. You got to read it. And we read about a community of Christ followers who were totally devoted to God, the church at its best. These guys were all in. What God asked them to do, they did. When God urged them out on a limb, they went. If God asked them to stop doing something, they stopped. They were all in, 100% devoted to God and to His church. And they had this radical love for God and for each other. They sold property and shared the money. They had meals in each other's homes, and racial walls and gender walls and socioeconomic walls, they came crashing down. They called each other brother and sister. They prayed bold prayers and expected God to answer them. And they had concern, so much concern for people outside the community of faith, that they were willing to risk their lives to share the message of the gospel of the good news of Jesus. And they had these experiences constantly that created a sense of awe of God and all that He was doing, and God honored them. Their faith grew, their boldness increased, and more people were getting saved. And at the age of 16, that picture of the church at its best, it stuck with me. More than stuck, it gripped me, because see, I believe to my core that the church at its best didn't stop with the book of Acts. You and I continue to be the church at its best. Every time you bring a slice of the kingdom of God to the people and the places where you are, that's the church at its best. Like every time you're in conflict with somebody and you want to hurt them, you want to gossip about them, because that's how it goes in the kingdom of this world, but you don't. Instead, you go to them humbly and in love, seeking reconciliation and forgiveness. That's the church at its best. Every time you get a little chunk of money and instead of spending it on yourself, you're going to give sacrificially to our church or to the poor or to somebody who's lost everything in a fire, that's the church at its best. Or when somebody has an addiction and they want to get well so badly, they're going to stop hiding and they're going to actually walk into a loving community, one of our Celebrate Recovery gatherings, to get well. That's the church at its best. Every time you include somebody who's lonely, every time you encourage somebody who's wandering off the path, every time you go join a serving team, that's the church at its best. So it's really cool to read about the church at its best in Acts chapter 2 and Acts chapter 4. But what if we were the church at its best? Let's be the church at its best, like today. Hope you have a great day.